Going to the fourth, then it's the Asylum stuff. First, Ullah v. Garland, Ben Winograd, who is a regular on the podcast. I'm essentially a marketing agency for Ben because he does all these great wins in the Fourth Circuit, particularly. Ullah v. Garland, it's a recent one. Well, they all are, right? July. This is about an individual fears the Pakistani Taliban. And quite frankly, with like everything that happened to him, it is surprising that he didn't win before the IJ or the BIA. I mean, this is like a pro-American helping American armed forces in Pakistan who are fighting in Afghanistan. And if you don't know about the Pakistani Taliban, they are quite the force. They're the entity, for example, that shot that young woman Malala in the back of the head, and she survived, and now she's that thing. That's the Pakistani Taliban.
Yeah. Oh, they're hardcore, yeah.
Quite friendly with their brethren in Afghanistan. And Mr. Ullah had quite the experience there. And the Fourth Circuit was pretty harsh on the BIA for permitting this denial of asylum to go forward. You know, I mean, they could find him anywhere. They found him in Peshawar. Spending a month in hiding in Islamabad is not reasonable relocation. I mean, the Fourth Circuit sent it back for, what did they send it back for? I want to get it right. With instructions to grant his application. The Fourth Circuit sent it back and said, grant this man asylum, which is a hell of a thing. that doesn't happen often. But the reason I love this so much, and again, I've already used it in a brief, is because the IJ found that Mr. Ullah had suffered past persecution in Pakistan, but had held that the record showed that he could reasonably relocate and avoid the Pakistani Taliban. And so that is, that takes away his asylum. In his case, because he spent like a month in Islamabad. Anybody who's ever spent a month, actually, I've never spent a month in Islamabad, but I feel like, well, we had a case in Islamabad. I said it we had a case in Islamabad. I said it on the podcast during depositions in a case that we took in Islamabad. Oil and us went to Islamabad. I didn't go. I wish I could have. And while we were in Islamabad, the Trump administration moved the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And protests got so serious in Pakistan that Oil and our attorney weren't allowed to even leave their hotel. That's how dangerous Islamabad was, just because they moved an embassy. So, a little pushback on real world experience that Islamabad is necessarily so safe. But putting that aside, the Fourth Circuit makes clear that to meet the burden to establish that relocation is reasonable, that's DHS's burden once the non-citizen establishes past persecution. DHS's burden is to establish that relocation is reasonable for the rest of the applicant's life. The standard is for the rest of their life. And query how DHS meets burden that literally goes for the rest of an applicant's life. I mean, that's quite the evidence. I don't even know how they could meet that. I would argue that, so there's two ways to rebut a well-founded fear when past persecution has been shown. One is reasonable relocation. The other is a fundamental change in country conditions. I would argue that fundamental change in country conditions also has a for the rest of their life standard in the Fourth. And that is just a hell of a burden.
Yeah.
And that is the burden on DHS in the Fourth. So, remember that. And good on you, Ben. Actually, it relies on a prior Fourth Circuit decision. So, not to take away from my good friend Ben, but actually that was already the rule in the Fourth Circuit, but it has been re-emphasized in the Ullah v. Garland decision. So, quite a case, which then just brings us to Chicas Machado v. Garland, also out of the Fourth. And this is one of those other good cases. It's about fear of gangs in El Salvador, MS-13, your classic case that so often is denied. But in this case, one of the reasons Ms. Chicas Machado won is because very smart counsel was able to tie her fear of the gang, not necessarily to a political opinion or a particular social group, which then gets to be this whole big fight, but to her religion. Her religion, because she gets targeted by the gang on her way to and from church. She's an evangelical Christian, by all accounts, very religious, and she's getting targeted because the gang thinks, first of all, they don't love, that she's such a religious person, that the gang isn't the most religious of things, but also, more importantly, that as this renowned, local, everyone knows she's a, for lack of a better word, good Christian girl, she could help them with their criminal enterprises and wouldn't be suspected. That's what the testimony showed. And so not only is this great because it's a guidepost for turning a fear of gangs into a religion claim, and of course a religion is a protected ground under the INA. It's one of the 5 protected grounds, and so you don't have to argue about particular social groups and all that madness. But this is a great decision on nexus, and this is not necessarily the law in all the circuits, but this is, nexus. Okay, fine, the gang is targeting you, but are they, and let's even assume it's with a religious component, but are they doing it on account of your religion, or is your religion just tangential? And the quote from the Fourth is this: use as a potential asset to the gang because no one would suspect her given her activity and conduct with the church was inextricably intertwined with her religion, end quote. The gang's threats of death were directed at Miss Chicas Machado and not another person because she was a practicing Christian and an active member of an evangelical church, which made her useful to the gang, end quote. Asylum law, the nexus analysis does not, quote, depend on the ultimate goal of the persecutor, end quote. That is, unlike how Trump attorneys general and some BIA precedent would have you believe, nexus doesn't require that the persecutor be trying to overcome or have an animus towards that protected trait, in this case, religion. It is sufficient to the Fourth Circuit that the gang was targeting her and not somebody else because of her religious practices. And that, even though they wanted to do it for criminal aims, not because they necessarily hate evangelical Christians. And so that's a hell of a ruling too. And that's why the Fourth Circuit is the Immigration Review podcast's Circuit of the Year. The circuit, the award's been awarded, and it's only August 2023. But the Fourth Circuit is really putting immigration law. It's at the tip of the spear right now in some respondent-friendly precedent.
Now, like in El Salvador, they have this new president who's like cleaning up all the gangs, put them in prison. I wonder what effect that's going to have on the whole gang member arguments for El Salvador eventually.
Well, I think that's a disputed sentence you just said. I'm no expert on it, but I'm not confident that he is doing that, or if instead he's done what Salvadoran presidents have done for the last 20 years, and that is literally pay the gangs money to make them stop killing each other. But once those deals fall through, all hell breaks loose. I truly don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing other things, and I'm hearing that in this sweep of Salvadoran suspected gang members, young men are getting swept up in it and going to jail and being targeted by police, even if they're not affiliated with the gangs. So
that's gotta
again,
suck.
that's why
and then you go to prison with all these gang around you. You're not.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's terrifying.
I'm not an expert. That's why I hire experts for our cases. I'm not going to sit up here and say I know what's going on in El Salvador. I do think
that could be an asylum thing too. My government is going to put me in prison, accusing me of things I'm not. Maybe that's
100%. Oh yeah, no, there are cases all the time, with a imputed particular social group that is gang, believe MS-13 members, but you're not. That is a cognizable ground for asylum as well. Those cases happen for sure in the Fourth Circuit, by the way. So,
a lot of business opportunities, advertising, billboards in El Salvador. Hey, dude, I'm not claiming.
I think it was the Ninth Circuit a couple of months ago. I might have talked about it on your show. They did it. They granted a petition for review for an imputed lesbian from El Salvador. She wasn't a lesbian, but her community thought she was and persecuted her because of it. So like that is alive and well in the circuits, imputed particular social group.
Interesting. And asylum law is creative, not creative, but like just there's so many different angles to everything. It's amazing.